So, how many more school killings are going to happen before they realize that there are people like me, retired veterans out there, who are willing to guard these schools for free? We will protect the children.
One of the biggest issues with the idea of arming teachers to deter school shooters, obviously, other than just spraying more bullets in the classroom, there's also an argument to put veterans in schools, retired veterans who will be willing to stand up. But the problem with that is that as of 2021, there were roughly 98,000 public schools, just public schools in the United States. What about all the private schools? What about the charter schools? What about the shopping centers and the churches that people run up inside of and shoot? Unless we're talking about raising the minimum age to 21 to purchase firearms, unless we're talking about making it more difficult for people through background checks to purchase firearms legally, then we're not really talking about doing anything to deter people from running up in schools, running up in churches, running up in supermarkets and shooting things up.
My thing is I'm not only there to protect the kids, but I'm there to protect the teachers as well if I do it. And for those of you who asked, why don't I just go do it? Well, state laws, when they say gun-free zones, because, criminals listen to that crap. If I show up and I stand out there with a gun, well, guess what happens? My ass goes to jail. I lose my concealed weapons permit. And, it doesn't solve anything but give the headlines to the media to say some veteran, probably say I have mental issues, maybe a little bit, but, it was out there with the gun in front of a school. And they would use it against us.
One of the most frustrating arguments against doing anything about gun violence in this country is that, well, criminals will get their hands on weapons anyway. And that's true, there's always a black market. But at the end of the day, making something harder to get your hands on, making the accessibility lessen, still makes it harder for people to legally purchase these weapons. And keep in mind, no one's talking about banning weapons. No one's talking about banning anyone's ability to get firearms. But if you have a history of mental health issues, if you're all over social media posting a bunch of crap that indicates that you're going to be violent, you shouldn't be able to go legally purchase something like an AR-15. I mean, think about how much more difficult it is to get your hands on something like heroin or cocaine unless you know somebody specifically who got it. Marijuana, that's a lot easier to get your hands on. One, it's more popular, it's less deadly, but it's also becoming legalized. So you can literally walk into stores and get your hands on these things. But again, the argument that, well, criminals will be able to get their hands on weapons anyway really is another way of saying, well, let's do nothing at all. Because again, no one's talking about banning guns.
But my favorite was a school teacher who did a stitch on me, who said that we don't need guns and we need emotional support. We need to teach more emotional support and crap like that in our schools. Well, ma'am, your schools created these shooters. Your schools are the ones that had us giving trophies for last place. And if you're not first, you're last. If you're not first, you don't get a trophy. It's that simple. You lost. Second place, silver medal, not as precious as gold. You don't do it. Second Amendment allows me to own it. I'm taking full advantage of that. You all have a great day. And remember, protect those kids at all costs. Protect those kids, especially from those school teachers out there that are brainwashing them.
In the comments that he made about, ma'am, your schools are the ones who made these shooters. Your schools are the ones who gave kids trophies for last place. That is the most generalized nothing burger statement I've ever heard. Well, maybe not ever, but definitely this week that I've heard. What does that mean? There's tens of thousands of schools, well, hundreds of thousands if you count again, the private, public, charter, all of that. Where are they, okay, maybe you get a participation award, maybe you get a second place. If you're not first, you're last, like this is Ricky Bobby or something. People running up in schools and shooting, people running up in churches and shooting, stuff like that. That's a much more complicated issue that reflects on society in terms of people's inability to make money, people's inability to find meaning, people's inability to find purpose in their life, their inability to connect with others, being caught up in the capitalist rat race. There's so many things that contribute to this problem. So again, unless you win, unless you're getting first place, you should be shamed. We don't need any emotional support groups. And then you turn around and say that you care about the kids more than everyone else. And your solution is to put more bullets inside of the classroom.